Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in 3 ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we bring on a 4-team member research team bringing this new thing called PAV. So we're basically added value per pass. So we're going to talk about passing and entries and a bunch of other things that are just good stuff and better understanding the game. A lot of stuff will confirm prior beliefs, and a few things might surprise you. So really excited to bring on this episode. It is fantastic. Just getting 4 people's expertise is pretty cool. Really excited for this one. Let's get into it. All right, on the Hockey IQ podcast today, brought on the 4 authors of a special paper. Guys, what did you win?
Big Data Cup. Like big is it the bowl or cup? It's the cup we got, right?
Yeah,
I think we got the cup.
Cup.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Who actually has the cup?
It's a virtual cup.
Virtual cup doesn't actually exist. Boo.
Yeah.
I want to see this like the NHL where you guys are drinking out of the cup together. I mean, you can't do it because of COVID, but just the idea of it would be great.
Next year, I guess get stat leads on the call and see what we can do for next year.
Well, maybe we should go get a cup right now and drink down some beers together in celebration, because this is quite some work you guys put together, and I would say it's the hottest piece of 2021 in the hockey analytics community. Bayesian space-time models for expected possession added value. So I think you should probably give us a down-to-earth, plain English version for us that aren't data scientists and beautiful hockey nerds like you guys.
Sure. So I'll take this one. So I guess like really the kind of the basics comes down to things that I think everyone knows about hockey. Like we're really trying to think about different parts of the ice have sort of different values. That's really kind of the premise that we're operating on. And what we want to do is to sort of build models that are sort of capturing that fact. And ultimately, the main sort of, I guess, metric that we end up building is trying to sort of ask the question, at least given the data that we have, after some sort of an action that happens, say like a pass or a shot or a turnover recovery, are we able to get the puck to somewhere that's more valuable, or are we getting it to somewhere that's less valuable? And then sort of all the fancy words are really just describing how we make that value judgment. So everyone sort of knows that space, different parts of space is valuable. If you're close to the net, we sort of know that you're probably more likely to score. And then the other bit is we throw in this kind of time dimension, and that's not really, it's not so much that time, the way we use it, is inherently valuable. It's more that we don't know, given the data we have, where all the players are on the ice. And we're sort of using time as a proxy for thinking about how set up defenses are. So we're sort of expecting that if the puck enters the zone, right away, we're probably closer to like a rush situation, and we expect defenses to be looser. And the longer that we've been in the zone, we expect things to be tighter. And what our models end up showing is that as we stay in the zone longer, the parts that become valuable sort of shrink, and how valuable they are end up sort of shrinking. So we're really just trying to value different parts of the ice, and we're trying to figure out like are we getting to more or less valuable spots, basically.
So, okay, so I'll play the 8 here because I am. So basically the value, or what you're trying to figure out, is what is the value of a certain space, and then continually to get into better spaces and compound those advantages.
Yeah, in a sense, like if you make a pass across the ice, like a good pass would be one that makes it in a better spot, and a bad one would probably one that puts it in a a worse spot. Like if you're passing it out of the zone, or you're throwing it in the corner when you could have got it to somebody in front of the net, something like that.
Got it. So let's deconstruct this by maybe starting back a little bit, and looking at the work that was maybe an inspiration for your paper. I know in there, when I read it, you're referencing a few different studies, saying you, and actually one of our authors here, Thibaud. So curious, what work led up to it, or what you're building off of, or the work before, and what was an inspiration to actually create this? Because I think it's absolutely fascinating.
That was actually, one of the many discussions I had with coaches over the past few years. And, it's always been like, as a stat analyst, you're presenting some stats and insight you get, but they're always like, yeah, but how does that involve into that other aspect of the game? Or, yeah, that guy does those great zone entries, but what he does after that doesn't lead to much, whatever. So then I decided to track the games a different way, and I started to linking what I call sequences together, meaning that for as long as a team had the puck in its possession, like from zone exit, zone entries, could be a couple of shots in the offensive zone, high danger passes, everything, till the point the puck is lost, all of this will be one sequence. And so by linking all those events together, you could then see like the consequences, like how much time, what percentage of the time that type of zone exit leads to a shot in the end, or that type of zone entry leads to a shot in the end. And in terms of players, I decided to divide the total expecting goals value of that sequence between the players that were involved in the first place. Because otherwise, usually you just like, okay, so that guy did the zone exit. Good, you get one zone exit. Okay, that guy did the zone entry. Okay, good, you get that zone entry. That guy took a shot. Okay, that's one shot for you. That guy got a shot assist. That's one shot assist for you. Okay, everybody goes home. Everybody gets something. But there, I actually calculated what was the impact from the zone exits in the first place, and the zone entries, and the shot assist, and the shot, whatever. So then I can divide the whole sequence according to the role everybody played. So we kind of brought that idea in one of the first meetings with the guys, and Tyrel and Brendan, they just took it and made it like that crazy version of it, way more rational, way more mathematical and scientific. But yeah, the start was, I guess, that kind of thinking.
Yeah, so to kind of like build on that. So yeah, we had this first meeting, and Thibaud's kind of telling us a little bit about how he kind of built these sequences. And I've been kind of reading some stuff in basketball, especially this Dan Servone et al. Paper. And something that's a little bit different, what they were trying to do is they were working with full tracking data. They have the location of every, all 10 basketball players on the floor. And, they're kind of almost working on the opposite case, where they're like, okay, if you have all that data, like what can you sort of do with it? How should you be thinking about possessions and stuff like that? And it turns out they had a few useful kind of mathematical ways of thinking about that. And where it builds onto what Thibaud is talking about is we really want to think about, instead of just like, what happens in the next action or the next thing that happens in the ice, we want to sort of think about the paths that happen. Like if we expect, if we have a pass or we have a zone entry and then a pass to the left side of the net, we don't want to just think about that sort of thing in isolation, but we want to think about the kind of path of that entire possession. And they had a nice sort of mathematical way to deal with that. And they also, because they were dealing with this really complicated data set, they used a lot of really nice tools computationally that we were able to take advantage of. that made our job of like making these really fancy models like a lot easier. So we were kind of just hopping on the bandwagon. They developed all these nice tools for dealing with much more complicated than the data than we have. And we were like, okay, if we have a slightly less complicated data set, what can we sort of squeeze out of this? And it really became about how can we simulate sort of sequences from any point on the ice and sort of use that to think about value and so on. And then the metrics ended up being related to sort of this other work that you were talking about with Singh and the former SportLogic guys.
Yeah, funny enough, Singh is a fellow Arsenal fan. So I actually saw his value or his stuff when it first came out in 2018, and that was kind of got my ideas flowing around. Like, if someone actually did something like this, it'd be really cool. And then you guys finally took the mantle, and I was just hooked as soon as I saw the work. Just to attach on, I think it's such a cool little design there. So I'm curious of the possession added value that you took from how he talked about as like an expected threat from a different position. And I believe he had, if I remember correctly, he had the field actually like squared off and like, I want to say like 64 squares, and each one had a value, and you could see like he broke it down multiple ways. So you guys know this much better than I, so maybe dive in a little bit of that and how you kind of worked and adapted that towards hockey.
I guess there's a couple bits, and feel free other people to jump on. I guess one of the things that we do differently, and this is really coming from that Dan Cervone paper, is most of the work that does this sort of thing, like you said, you kind of have to chop up the field or the ice. You pick some, you make nice squares, or maybe you have special little regions of the ice that you've kind of predetermined. One of the tools that we're using in Law allows us to be a little bit fancier, where we sort of chop everything into triangles, but we don't really think about the ice as being, not everything inside the same triangle is the same. So we actually are allowed to treat the ice sort of almost continuously, which is really nice. And then I guess in terms of how we sort of make the metric, what we were really thinking about in terms of possession added value, it really goes back to that thing about like, did you put it into a more valuable spot? So if you're at a certain spot on the ice, we say how valuable is that spot is related to all of the sort of possession paths that we think is likely to come from that spot. So we simulate a bunch of paths, and some of those paths basically end up as goals. Some of those paths end up as turnovers and stuff like that. And we can get sort of a distribution of value from any spot on the ice. And then we see that, after such and such a play, it ends up in some other spot on the ice and some new period of time. And then we're able to sort of do the same kind of thing. We simulate a bunch of like, what are the likely paths that would be from this point on the ice? And then we can take the difference between the two, and you say, that's how much you've sort of added. That kind of comes back to what Singh really talked about. We don't necessarily want our metrics to be related to whether or not there actually was a goal. We want to be able to value things about like, whether you're kind of getting things into more valuable on average space. Maybe some other guys want to jump in here too. I'm talking a little bit.
Oh yeah, I think you nailed that pretty well. Yeah, basically, that Sing work was kind of doing the same thing we were trying to do. So we had the same kind of idea, and we kind of borrowed that, and the way they kind of created the metric was to basically like to value an event or to value an action on the ice. What he did was to take the value after the event minus the value at the moment prior to the event. And we just did the exact same thing with that, where basically we're looking at kind of like how much more value have we gained because of the action taking place, basically.
So you're looking at patterns and figuring out just basic trends. Like, are we trending in the right direction? It's the way I'm understanding this so far. Of like, hey, this looks like it'll be a more valuable next play based on the most common options that are presented in a hockey game. Am I thinking about that right?
I think that's reasonable. Yeah. So like, the basically our models are informed by the plays that actually do happen. So, like if we're seeing more we're seeing more passes from a certain part of the ice, and we're seeing maybe more good passes. For example, maybe a spot is going to be a little bit more valuable. We're seeing a lot of maybe if a part on the ice has a lot of like high value shots that are quite common, because it's likely that you're going to actually be able to get off a shot. Those kinds of areas of the ice are going to be, valued a little bit more. So of course, like we sort of put the framework of like, we try to figure out where on the ice different things happen, and where on the ice, are we likely to score, where are we likely to pass. And then when we sort of simulate these full sequences, they sort of end up telling us, what is eventually likely to happen from every kind of point on the ice, given the sort of data and all that.
Excellent. So as you go through that, did anything jump out as, that's a little different, or I didn't expect that, or maybe that plays a little more valuable than most people probably give it credit for?
Nick or Thibaud, do you want to take that, or?
I guess it's not, most of the stuff we saw right away from the result, they were pretty obvious, and in a way, like you said, we were pretty happy to find them, because that meant we were on the right track. Like Tyrel mentioned earlier, like the difference between how the quality is there when you're still on the rush, when you can quickly get into the slot and everything, in comparison to like a few seconds later, like the defense as back check and the slot is locked in and you're pushed on the boards and the value is just gone, that kind of stuff. I guess one thing we expected but we did not find was around passes maybe, and we really more were expecting, because we had all the passes in the data set from Statlete, and so it's included in the path formula, like players get positive or negative value from their passing plate. And we were really more expecting to see more positive value from those passes. Like, because when you're watching a game and you're watching highlights, whatever, everybody's remember those really nice passes, high danger passes that like split up the defense and create goals and everything. But we really, I guess, realize the huge amount of passes that are happening inside a hockey game that are not moving the needle at all. And we saw on the heat map like how the vast majority of passes were actually along the board, like low to high or high to low, and they're just like passing time maybe, or just escaping a defenseman, and in the end of the day, like most of those passes were just zero value. And that was actually leading to another question, because is it really zero value? Because if you're just escaping a defenseman but still keeping the play alive in the offensive zone, that may lead to something down the road. So the value is not really zero, it should be something more, but that was really hard to quantify at the time. But I guess, yeah, something around passes we did not expect really.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, like passes are definitely the most challenging, I think, thing with this data. And especially our first pass at this, we actually found it was like more negative, like the passes were more negative. And when we presented, this work originally, that was like one of the big comments that basically everyone had, is like the passing stuff doesn't quite make sense. We were able to retune, like we were able to fit our models a little bit better. There was a few kind of technical issues that we had that led this to be, this result was a little bit more extreme. But even when we did it like, more correctly in a sense, we kind of have this issue that Thibaud was talking about, because we don't know where all the players are on the ice. It seems likely to me anyway that we have this kind of selection issue, is that especially if you're passing around the boards, as long as we assume that like these players in the OHL are reasonable decision makers, they're probably not like trying to make passes that are negative value. And if they're making these really poor, like so-called low value passes, it's probably because there's something we're not seeing in the data. Like if you're in the corner, like why would you pass it to the absolute like farthest of the point? Well, you might have just cycled it up the boards because you had a lot of pressure on you down low. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad decision. And like Thibaud said, that if that prolongs the sequence, and if the alternative was getting the puck stripped in the corner, almost certainly that's a better decision to make. But in our models, we can't quite see that because we don't know if there was like a lot of pressure down low. We only get to kind of see these patterns on average.
Goes back to the old adage of it's a shoot and recovery game. So that's very curious. So passes maybe are not as valuable as we thought they were, or they're valuable in ways that we can't quantify quite yet. So from that, tell me if I'm off there, but from that, I'm wondering, where does this research in analytics lead PAV? Like, how do we utilize what you've done here? Whether that be scouting, player development, coaching. How does that fit into the hockey world?
Yeah, so as Tyrel was saying and was explaining earlier, PAV is basically a way for us to quantify how different players and teams improve the condition of the puck on the ice. So as coaches, what we often talk about to players in video meetings or during drills is to give good pucks to teammates as opposed to bad pucks. So it's all about giving a puck in a better condition than when they found it. And so what PAV really allows us to do from a quantitative standpoint is to identify the strengths and weaknesses in our teams or individual players' game as a coach, to then be able to address them by looking at clips to really understand why these are our strengths or why these are our weaknesses. So it's really a tool to help guide us towards understanding our structure, our tactics, or our individual player skills a bit better as a coach. And then on the scouting side, what's really interesting is that PAV allows you to differentiate between two types of players. You have the types of players that are going to make players around them better by improving the condition of the puck for their teammates. And these are the types of players that are usually going to have transferable and projectable skills. So as a scout, these are the types of players that you want to look for to be able to continue developing and arrive at the next level, whether it's in the NHL or any other next level. And then we can differentiate these players from the other type players, which make not necessarily poor decisions with the puck all the time, but that from time to time have a habit of making the puck someone else's problem. And so these are the types of players that are going to be less projectable in terms of transferable skills, and which you won't necessarily be able to develop at their full potential, given that they have this habit of making the puck someone else's problem instead of trying to improve possession for the team. So in terms of player development, this is kind of comparable, where as a player developer, as an analyst, it allows you to identify the strengths and the weaknesses of different players in different areas of the game. If you break down PAV or you segregate PAV in the different types of events, into different categories, and then it tells you what you need to focus on in terms of drills, in terms of off ice and on ice training to improve the overall game of the player, but by then obviously linking the quantification of these stats to the video analysis.
Awesome. Improving the conditions of the puck. I love that. That's awesome. So we've talked about how passing is kind of net even. A lot of it is a little bit negative for whatever reason. I'm curious then, as these players are improving the conditions of the puck, how or where are they drawing positive PAV from? Are they taking it and skating it into these dangerous positions more often? Just like, how, if I'm a player and I'm like, I want to have a high positive PAV, how do I do that?
Yeah, so I'll kind of start off by just kind of breaking down what kind of factors, rather than just like skating it and that, like what kind of factors go into the models that kind of affect that. And I can break that down into 3 different groups that I think kind of describe all of the information that we're taking into the models and that end up affecting the outcome of PAV. So the first we talked about a lot already, which is spatial information. So basically, is your action helping to put the puck into a high danger area? So are you taking it from the perimeter to the middle of the ice? And that can be from like, there's a variety of things like you were mentioning, you could skate it in, you could pass it in, you could just shoot the puck and then get a rebound in a good spot, right? So
even
like
where
that.
you skate it in is we found is important. Whether you're able to like skate it into the middle of the ice, for example, versus on the side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then another factor that we have too is contextual information. So this is more related to just shots and passes as we value them in the model. But with shots, we look at things like is there traffic or is there a one-timer on the shot? And things that can go into our expected goals model and kind of or things that influence how likely it is that you're going to score on a shot. And that ends up influencing or boosting or decreasing your PAV value. So yeah, that's kind of how the contextual factors add into the shot there. With the pass, the main thing we're looking at is if it's complete or not, right? Because a pass from, say, the corner to the slot that's complete versus incomplete is a completely different thing, right? Where like you might be getting it in a good space, but then it's basically a jump ball if you get it there and you don't get it tape to tape or the receiver doesn't get it, right? So that kind of like makes the spatial information conditional on what's actually going on. And that's kind of what we can sniff out just from using the data as is. Then like Tyrel was mentioning earlier as well, we have these time factors or time information. And we use this by looking at like relevant events or by kind of comparing where we are now to relevant events, right? Like say how much time is left in a period. So for example, if we're walking in, we just get into the zone and we take a slap shot right away, that's generally going to be a bad move unless there's like 1 second left in the period and you just want to get a shot off quick, then that's the best possible move. So that's one way that time can factor in. Then also, when we're looking at shots, we'll look at time since the last pass or time since the pass if it occurred just prior to the shot to factor in pre-shot movement. Then also time since the last shot to kind of factor in any rebound chances as well. Then the last thing too is time since entry. So that's another thing that's kind of a big thing for kind of approximating the difference between a rush versus in zone play. So yeah, that's kind of what we do there. Like we use time mainly to gain extra context that we don't really have in the data, rather than just kind of looking at like trying to look for tic-tac-toe plays, you know? And yeah, those are kind of the main factors that go into things, into the model and how it affects the PAV values that are coming out.
All right, to recap again, as I'm needed here. Spatial, basically looking at the location. That's number one. Number two being contextual information, aka like if I take a one-timer, that's probably a pretty valuable shot compared to someone just holding it and bombing a point shot. And three, time factors, how long since a shot, entry, or pass. Did I recap that okay?
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect.
All right, excellent. So we're talking about time since entry. So I'm curious if you found a lot of differences that show up in the analysis between a rush versus an offensive possession chance and what factors go into that. And that'll lead us then easily into on entries. How can players add value to their possession and their path?
Well, I'll start with the rush and Mick will follow, I guess, on the entries. We don't get like a percentage of how much better is it with a rush or something, but we present it on the heat maps on the DACA final and in the paper that was published on Hockey Graphs after that. But we will clearly see like the most dangerous area was really wide, like still a few seconds right after zone entries, like it was the slot, but outside of the slot as well. And just a few seconds later, that dangerous area was shrinking towards the net. So that means the most dangerous area was shrinking, was getting more and more difficult to get in as time moves on, but also areas that used to be dangerous while you were in the rush situation were not dangerous anymore. So that was kind of a visual result we got through it that were really speaking, I think, and we showed it to a couple of people, including coaches, and they were really, really enthusiastic to see that with their own eyes, like something everybody knew already, but then we have some kind of statistical proof of that.
So past research actually has shown that approximately 60% of the goals at the highest levels of hockey, so like the NHL, are scored off the rush. So rush offense is a pretty important part of a team's ability to create quality chances, score goals, and eventually win hockey games. And as Thibaud and Tyrel were kind of explaining earlier, our research with PAV has shown that it's pretty important off the rush and off the entry to play the puck quickly. And as Thibaud was saying, it's because the slot area and the accessibility of the slot area is shrinking as time goes by. And to be able to play the puck quickly off the rush, we can go back to the basic principles of rush offense, which will allow us to play the puck quickly and therefore increase our PAV by improving the condition of the puck. So the things that players and teams can do to improve their PAV, to improve the condition of the puck on the rush, are to leverage the middle to enter the zone, which will give them options on both flanks to make possible passes and create movement, and quick movement for that matter, in the O-zone off the rush. Also, leveraging speed differentials is a very smart and efficient way to be able to create movement quickly and try to open up the slot area even more. And bringing all of this together using lane changes will also allow these quick transitions from one play to the other, which will make sure that you create your rush chance before the back checkers, the players that are backtracking, come back in a structured defensive formation and lock in the slot area.
I love how you're putting the tactics to the numbers and the math here. It's gorgeous. So speed differentials key for opening the slot area. A lot of stuff's happening off the rush. So I know the key for a lot of people, and I think it's becoming the norm here, is just finding ways to enter the zone through the middle. And I'm assuming this is just another arrow in the quiver of proof that middle entries are just ridiculously valuable. Would you say that's true? Or I'm assuming you guys know a lot more on this than I am. Assuming this is not a new phenomenon, but just continue to add a grain of sand to the pile in the heap that it is.
Oh no, just like it's absolutely true. Like getting into the middle, your shots are more likely to be valuable. But even stuff with like passing and stuff, like there's a huge. We were talking earlier about completed passes. Being on the inside of the ice, the probability of completing a pass is way higher than being on the outside of the pass. And it's on the outside, like when you're on the outside trying to like penetrate into the defense, which, they're naturally sort of structuring themselves to guard, those high value spots in the slot and stuff like that. That's really hard. When you've penetrated the middle of the ice, it's really interesting. Not only are your shots more likely to be valuable, but I think what's probably happening is you're getting these kind of like collapsing stuff, and it becomes easy to pop the passes back out and stuff like that. You end up getting more options. Overall, we're seeing a lot more valuable, a lot more options, a lot more, danger.
I guess this kind of leads into my next question that I kind of had was, what passes are most common? What PAV value does that have? So I'm assuming if the middle is hard to get into, most of them are on the outside, which is slightly negative. But if you're able to get to the middle, that completely makes up for all those negative values, or basically maybe those possession plays to finally, okay, now we can attack, or someone missed an assignment. Now there's rotations happening. Is that what you guys were seeing?
Yeah, so in terms of passing, as Tyrel was explaining, the value of passing from the inside to the outside is not necessarily it's not going to increase your PAV per se, but the accessibility of the outside areas is much greater than being passing to the inside, because teams, as Tyrel was saying, are going to tend to guard the slot area. So it's much harder to get a pass through from the outside to the inside, but a pass from the outside, or at least a pass attempt from the outside to the inside, is much more valuable than those low to high D to D passes that are not necessarily adding that much value, but are structurally creating movement, which might open up further opportunities to pass to the high danger areas.
Yeah, I would add that our models also compare like what's happening on the ice to what is expecting to be happening on the ice. So if you're in the inside and you're passing to the outside, so that's a very low value, but we're expecting very low value. So you're not going to be really like penalized or anything because you're doing that. And you probably have a good reason to do that, but probably you just want to keep the play alive. But if you're on the outside and you're trying to pass on the inside, we kind of expect you to fail, because it's really hard to get in the inside. But if you succeed, like if you're really a talented passer, if that's one of your main skill, and you succeed on those difficult passes, then you're gonna get a tremendous value, because you exceeded expectation in doing something really hard to do, and you created a lot of value for your team right after.
Awesome. So let's take this to fairyland a little bit. Let's say that Have becomes the new Corsi, and we knew, or Corsi as they say, that it was definitely gamified, where players started just throwing and chucking pucks onto the net to increase their Corsi, and therefore throw off the stats in their favor for X, Y, and Z reasons, bigger contracts, etc. A player tries to gamify their PAV. Should it be like a big running back where they're just plowing their way into the middle, or what do you see? Maybe some unintended consequences from your research being the new star out there.
Yeah, I think like you kind of mentioned, just forcing stuff into the middle would probably be a way to boost it. Because they're getting into that high value space, but you might not be getting a good chance. Like even if you do complete a pass, as the data is right now, as we have it, we don't know kind of the locations of the surrounding players, right? So you can make a pass into the middle, but there can be 3 guys right there ready to jump on the guy, and that pass is going to give you high PAV. But we don't know like if that guy's wide open or not. So that's kind of like, it's not going to be as high as it really looks like in the data as we have it right now. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that too.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Like it's, like you're saying, we're kind of observing things at this. We observe every time there's like a stat leads event, a pass, a turnover, a shot, or whatever. And exactly like Brendan said, like there's going to be situations that our sort of average characterization of the condition of the puck, if we want to like call it that, is not going to line up with the actual characterization of the condition of the puck. And there would probably be ways to cheat it. Like, yeah, you throw a sneaky pass back and forth, like into the middle, tap it back or something like that, which isn't a really useful hockey play. You might just actually be burning, seconds or something like that. The nice thing is like, what I would say is that something like this, which relies on expectations, and also something like this that a lot of what we were doing, we had our eye on part of why we cared so much about thinking about that Dan Cervone paper was we wanted to think about, well, what would we do with full tracking data and stuff like that? So one, I guess 2 points there. The first one is that when you make models that are based on expectations, if you get new data and people are cheating, also our expectations will change a little bit. So some of that cheating will get adjusted for a little bit, but also we're hoping that this kind of framework can fit into even more complicated data where we have full tracking data, which I think it's going to become increasingly hard to gamify. Not that there's always going to be some difference between what our model says is like value and what is like actual value. And there might be ways for players to manipulate that, but I suspect it gets smaller. Like the edges, it's kind of like like a betting market that gets more and more participants in it. Like there might be edges left, but I think it's going to be really hard to scrape as our sort of data gets bigger and our models get a little bit better. But maybe that's hubris. I don't know.
So you already kind of touched on it, but where do you see going next with your guys' work, whether it be on this subject or a different subject, or just some interesting areas that you're exploring?
Yeah, so basically what we're working on next is expanding it from just the offensive zone, which we did in the Big Data Cup, to work on the full ice. So with that, we have to deal with like transitions between zones and how those work and how to kind of model those. And we do have most of the conceptual framework pretty much laid out for that. We're just kind of coding it now and sorting out little details in it. Then obviously once it's done, it'll take a lot of computational time to actually run the simulations on the data. So that's kind of a whole other issue in itself. But that's kind of the next big step we want to take here in the next few months, I guess, as we keep working on it. We were working on it earlier in the summer. We did take a bit of a break over the last month and a half to kind of recharge a little bit, because I know myself and everyone else has a lot going on here. But yeah, that's kind of our next big step here. Then obviously in the future, if tracking data were to become available, that would be another big step, the next big step beyond just using this event level data, right? And then yeah, I guess speaking individually, like I'm going to be doing my master's this year, so I'm hoping to find spare time where I can keep working on it and get it done. Then I know the other guys here, they have a lot of big news that came out recently too, and exciting things going on as well.
Yeah, maybe I could jump in. I guess like Brendan said, we're working on this sort of big the full ice version. There's a lot of interesting kind of I guess questions and stuff that come up when we try to extend it. So that's definitely taking up some time. And yeah, so I also just started working with Zealous Analytics. So I'm going to be doing some basketball stuff. So that's going to be taking up a lot of my time.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see the project going on the full ice, because there were a couple of players in the project we researched, and we were kind of disappointed they didn't get like such a high PAV. But then we thought, but we're only looking at the offensive zone, so maybe those players, they have the huge bulk of their impact is before the offensive zone, in zone exit, in transition, and through the neutral zone, and we could not capture that yet. So that was a bit frustrating. So we want to expand on that. I would love to see full tracking data with player movement available, and get like expected pass completion with the position of defender, like on which side is the stick handle and that kind of stuff. And so you could like train players in kind of you put them in such a position, such a context, like if you do this, you have a 45% chance of success in going further. If you do that, you're 60%. That is the choice you should make. That's kind of a bit of a robotic thing, and it's a fairy tale, but I would be exciting to like kind of model and play around in getting selecting the best choice available for players, like kind of what they're doing in baseball, really. And personally, yeah, we just launched the project in Switzerland today. So I'm kind of focused on the European hockey, and we launched a website. We're going to track a whole bunch of games there and make the analytics available to the public. Try to expand the knowledge of the public and the media, and showcase how analytics can be used on a daily basis to like see the game and understand the games better. So it's a pretty exciting adventure for me.
So what I was telling the guys is that this year what we did is that we did a scouting report on Connor Lockhart for the Erie Otters. And now if we ever develop a full ice model, what we could do in the next 2 years, if we have data from the Erie Otters, is to develop a scouting report on Connor Lockhart's brother, who just got drafted by the Erie Otters, and Connor's Lockhart brother is a stay-at-home defender. So having this full ice model will allow us to better quantify his impact on the team's PAV. And I think that could be super cool to have a sort of continuity in our project. But so personally, for future projects, one of my new projects that I'm working on is with a team in the women's hockey team in Sweden, where I'm looking to kind of incorporate our PAV metric and develop other metrics as well to evaluate and help with the player development in the team. It's a pretty young team, so a lot of opportunities for growth, and using metrics like PAV and expected play driving metrics allows us to improve the game of the players there.
That's awesome, guys. I'm really excited for you. So that covered all of what I had. Assuming you guys are much smarter than the average hockey fan, or whether it be in this paper, your other work, whatever it may be, what are some important things that, you're an NHL player, an NHL prospect, and you want to get better and play the game smarter. What would be something that you guys should be, or we should all be thinking about or doing, or, just what's a better way? Like we just talked about, central zone entries. When you be going through the middle, that's a no-brainer now. What are some things that you're looking at?
I'm going to answer before Mick and Thibaud, who are much smarter about these kinds of things than me, get in there. I'm just going to, get my answer in. So one thing I thought a lot about in this project, one of the most interesting players that I've ever played shinny and beer league hockey with is a guy named Mike Bishai, who is famous for this one NHL fight where he was he played for the Oilers in 10 games or something in 2005, and he ended up in the Arizona Coyotes bench while he was fighting. But anyway, he's from Edmonton, and I've played shinny and beer league with him. And the thing that makes him so dangerous, and we were kind of talking about this earlier, is he always seems to have more options than anybody else. And that's something that makes he's able to pull off passes and stuff like that a lot of players wouldn't be able to, not necessarily because his passes are more accurate, but because at every sort of moment he seems to be threatening so many. He's always threatening to shoot. He's always threatening to pass to pretty much anybody on the ice, and it's really hard to read him and stuff like that. So he's somebody that I sort of had in mind, and I think maybe I guess if you're trying to stick in the NHL, maybe he's not the right model. But if for anybody else, I think he would be a pretty good model for how to be a very good hockey player, and maybe somewhat related to what we've been talking about.
When you go through the numbers and you're tracking game yourself, that's a bit extreme, but you're starting to see games in a different way, meaning that you're looking for those most dangerous components in the game. And one thing that is actually killing my pleasure of watching a hockey game just for pleasure, like in a bar before COVID or anything, is you see a guy entering the defensive zone on the side and just shooting at the net. And I'm always yelling at the TV that's useless. That's useless. Why did you do that? And because I know there were way much better options available. I mean, you should have at least continue skating toward the lower net and so on. Start thinking about the options available as a fan when you're watching the game. Offensively, we talk about those zone entries. Keep control of the puck. Try to go through the center. Change skating lanes. Not just throw pucks at the net and hoping for the handful of rebounds that will happen in the game, that kind of stuff. Defensively, don't throw yourself into a forecheck, hitting bodies. Just wait, more at the blue line, neutral zone, close the game, push toward the board. Start to play smarter and watch smarter. I guess that would be one thing. It's not much, just see the game in its entirety and try to imagine what the players are thinking when they're playing, like the decision making that is behind their action and what could be done better at your level, because you're still just sitting on a couch and not on the ice with the danger of being crushed by a 250 pounds guys on the other side. But that's one thing.
That's funny. That's exactly why we started the Hockey IQ podcast, Hockey IQ newsletter. We want to play the game smarter. I was sick and tired of the exact same thing. I even wrote a beautiful piece of why, and it was titled "Point Shots Suck," and exactly why what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And to add to that, one thing I would say is, as a player and as a coach who's sitting down with a player to watch clips, the one thing that coaches and players can focus on to improve their PAV is to always keep in mind the basic definition of PAV. So am I on this play giving a puck that's in a better position than when I found it? And by doing this exercise on a continuous and regular basis, what's going to happen is that you're going to be able, as a player, when you watch video, to translate your mental exercise to the game. And it's going to allow you to play the game in a smarter way, which will help your team at the end of the day create more quality chances and score goals without necessarily overthinking the game, because it becomes ingrained into the way you actually think the game.
Yeah, then at this point, I'm just kind of mimicking what everyone else said, just a little bit differently. But I think what PAV kind of helps you with is like when we're talking about gamifying PAV, like we were earlier, another way to do that is to just be selfless in a way, right? Because if you're on like the left boards and you make a nice cross-ice pass to the right slot, and then the guy in the right slot takes a shot and scores. Basically on that play, if we're looking at just the regular data, just expected goals like we traditionally do, then all of the value is going to go to the shooter there who got the nice pass and then just tapped it into the net, right? But what PAV allows you to do is it allows you to assign the value a bit more rightfully to the guy who made the pass there, who made the selfless play and who made a nice pass to the slot, which was really the key play in scoring that goal, right? So yeah, kind of like putting a bit of a more like mathematical model spin on it. But yeah, basically just be selfless, do the right play for your team rather than doing the right play for yourself and just trying to get value in a way.
As a guy who played like Joe Thornton and passed when he was in a spot where he should have shot, I appreciate that. I would have been beautiful path. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. I know this was an enlightening conversation. If you have anything else, let me know. Otherwise, it's getting late and I'll let you guys go. This was awesome.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
It's been awesome.
Cheers.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I know I did. So before we let you go, though, we'd like to remind you to please like our podcast, subscribe to it, give us a follow, and share this with all the hockey people in your life. We really appreciate growing this community, this podcast. Remember, we also have a newsletter, the Hockey IQ newsletter as well. Really excited to continue to grow this. So please help us grow this further by liking, subscribing, following, and sharing with everyone. So appreciate you all. Take care.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch you beauts here next week for a brand new episode.